Welcome to 52 Weeks of Hope, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited that you're here too. And I keep saying I'm so impressed with the new baby and everything that you're here. And I know you have a new book coming out.
June 20th.
Oh, yay. Okay. So, and this is your third book, I believe, right?
Yes.
Do you want to just talk about that? And how did you even get started doing tarot and writing for teens? You do so many different modalities, really. And tarot still confuses me a little bit. So you can talk about that as well. But how did you get started in this realm, or did you grow up with it?
Oh, so many good questions. I started reading tarot when I was 14, and I was a little teen witch.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what I was doing. I saved up babysitting money and bought my first tarot deck at Barnes and Noble with the only deck that they had. And it came with a little guidebook that was very esoteric and way over my head. And so I would read it and I was like, I don't really know what this is, but I would just play with the cards. And I kind of went along that path for, more than a decade. And it wasn't until I went through my dark night of the soul in 2016 when my whole life fell apart. And I really turned to tarot and like angel cards and oracle cards and all the cards to be my support system. I was going through a divorce, which I had initiated, and my whole family and all my friends were like, what the F are you doing? Like, you have the greatest guy in the world. Why are you ruining everybody's life? And a lot of people turned their back on me. And I was definitely the villain, but truly it was the best thing for both of us. I just saw it first.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Like, you do what's right for you in your soul and your gut and whatever. And everyone, yeah.
Everyone hates you.
Yeah.
And people don't understand. And I didn't have the language at the time to share why I didn't understand why it was happening. And so turning to tarot really helped me when I felt like I was falling.
That's so interesting because I have 8 overarching messages from when I compiled all the messages of hope. And one of them is, whatever modality you're called to, it works.
Yes.
And it's so interesting that you were called to tarot. So how did you get called to tarot? Do you even know, or that's just what called you?
I just, I picked them back up and I started working with them again. And then it was like, how synchronicity works. It's like all of a sudden you're scrolling on Instagram and something tarot related comes up, or you see something in an email and it's something and I started watching YouTube videos and other readers giving like a weekly message. And it was just like, book came into my life at the time that was like how to work with moon cycles. And so it was like doing rituals, and there was a lot of tarot in there. So it was like really sparking my passion for it in a way that I never got to experience when I was young because I didn't have the resources, and I'm a little older. So like the internet really didn't exist when I was in high school. And so there weren't all these, great resources. So that's kind of how I got into it. And I was reading them over and over and over again. And then I felt kind of called to write about my experience. I started journaling, and I've never been this is the funny thing, I've never been a writer.
That is interesting because I know you write for a lot of publications and everything else. So you started just from journaling? Okay, keep going. Yeah. So you started journaling.
I was really alone. I didn't have anybody in my life. So I had my tarot cards and my oracle cards, and I had my journals. And all this stuff was just coming up, and I was going through like a journal a week. I had a stack of them, and I was like, had this thought like, oh, am I supposed to turn this into like a memoir? Like, am I supposed to write about this? Like, I don't know where all this writing has come from. I've never been a writer before. And I started working on a memoir. I guess I should also say I left the marriage. I also left the home that we had lived in together, and I left my jobs. So I was like, I'm done with all of this. I was living in Florida for 20 years. And I was like, I'm just going to get rid of everything I own and pack like 3 suitcases into my car and drive to New York and rent a house or rent a room in a house like on the Long Island Sound and write.
I'm
going to go be a hermit in the woods.
Yeah. And that's what you did?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I had no plan. I had a ton of savings. I had been saving up to buy a house with my ex, and that wasn't happening. So I was like, well, I guess I have some like FU money to hold me while I figure this out.
So time to do some work on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was like, and I can't be around anybody. I need to just go where nobody knows me and I don't know anybody. And I wrote the book, and it was bad. And I realized it was like, oh, this is just like a cathartic thing. But I was like, it would be kind of cool to publish a book and see it in the stores. And so I started doodling in my sketchbook because I'm also an artist. I don't know if we've mentioned that, but one of my jobs, I was an illustrator for an interior design magazine.
Okay.
So I have an art background. So I started doodling like what the book would look like. You know, I drew like a bookshelf in like Barnes and Noble, like in the self-help section, and like drew like a ton of it with like the name on the spine. And then one of the books I had opened, and in the interior, I drew a tarot card. Like I drew the Fool, which is the first card in the tarot that is the fool. They call him the Fool because they're about to jump off a cliff and start this new spiritual journey. So I drew myself as the Fool jumping off the cliff. And I was like, oh, wow, this whole thing really reminds me of the tarot, you know, of the Fool's journey, of going through all these archetypes. And yes, of course, it's very spiritual and occult related, but really it's very Jungian. And it's very psychological, these archetypes that you're, you know, going through when you do this like deep inner work. So I started drawing myself, kind of going through and making a tarot deck. And again, it was just for my own healing purposes.
Yeah, yeah.
I say that, you know, once I moved to New York, all of these opportunities to work with and take classes and be around all these other tarot readers. And some of my heroes that were like big names were like offering classes. And I just so happened to get like the last spot in the class. And all of a sudden I'm in a room with 20 other people doing this like deep healing work and learning. And it felt like the most immersive therapy I've ever been through. And I told them that I was kind of working on this little deck, and they were like, oh, we want to see it. And I'd never shared that with anybody. So it was like a safe space to share my drawings and my story, just all these synchronistic things that started happening with people encouraging me to make it into a real tarot deck. And I was like, who's going to want to buy a tarot deck with one character that looks like me?
Yeah.
Dark hair. She had the glasses. I'm like, this is not marketable in any way, but it really feels good for me. And I had somebody reach out to me on Instagram that was an old friend from high school I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, who was a graphic designer. And she was like, what are you going to do with this deck? And I was like, I don't know anything about publishing. And she was like, well, I can help you. Like, I'll lay it out in design for you and we'll find you a printer. And we found a printer and she laid the whole thing out for me. And then somebody else reached out and was like, do you have a website where like people can buy this? Like, do you have an e-commerce platform? And I was like, I can barely turn a computer on. I have no idea what I'm doing. So it was just kind of like the ocean, like people were carrying me on these waves. And then all of a sudden it was a thing. And I put out just to, you know, my friends and whatnot on the internet, like, hey, I'm going to order 100 of these decks. Does anybody want to buy them? And I like sold out of them almost immediately and was ordering more. And then it just kind of became my business.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And how did you end up writing for all these magazines and for teens? And we want to talk about that.
Yeah. So it kind of started out small. You know, I was living in Brooklyn, which, you know, when you live in New York City, it's like, you never know who you're going to meet, right? So it was kind of like through words where people were like, oh, you should go to this place. They hire tarot readers. And so I found, you know, I went there and it was this fabulous boutique. It's still there. It's called Jill Lindsay and it's in Fort Greene. It's a fabulous place. Very magical. It's like everything you want. It's like amazing clothes by like independent local designers. And then they also have like a healing space where you can have Reiki and you can get a tarot reading and astrology and all the things. And she wanted to carry my deck. And so all of a sudden my deck was being sold in stores. And then she was like, hey, do you want to come here and be a tarot reader? And I would meet famous actors would come in and I would read their tarot and they would buy my deck. And, you know, you just never know who you're going to meet. And there was a wonderful woman that I met and I did a tarot reading for, and she bought 2 copies of my deck. She was like, oh, it's for me and for my friend in California who, you know, we're both learning tarot and we'd love to learn it from you. And then the pandemic hit. Everything that I had been building, you know, I was doing corporate tarot readings at that point for like big fashion designers. And it was so cool. It was so much fun. 2019 was a really fun year to live in New York. And when the pandemic hit and I lost all of my income, basically, you know, because I was doing readings and I was doing workshops and retreats and like all sorts of cool stuff. And I freaked out and panicked because I was like, oh, I don't really qualify for any unemployment. I don't know what to do. And rent is certainly not canceled. And then I cried for 2 weeks. And then I said, oh, if somebody came to me and was having a tarot reading and told me that everything fell apart and they had been working on building all of this great stuff and then it disappeared, what would you say? And I started laughing and I was like, oh my God, I would say the universe cleared your schedule because you're supposed to be doing something else. So why don't you stop crying and just let it come. And like 2 weeks later, I got an email from an editor at Penguin Random House that was the friend of my clients that she had sent my tarot deck and guidebook. And she said, oh, we're putting together a tarot book for beginners and we're looking for an author. And my friend gifted me your book and your deck, and I love your voice. Do you think that you could write this book for us in 6 to 8 weeks? And I was like, wow, that's kind of perfect timing because my schedule is very clear. So that's how I got my first book deal.
I love those stories. The synchronicity is exactly that. So
crazy.
How did you end up writing for teens? Is it self-help for teens? What do you exactly do in that genre?
So they looked at the numbers of who was buying the book, and the demographic overwhelmingly was teenagers. And they were like, we need to develop this book that really speaks to the teen experience. And, my little heart like broke into a million pieces because I remembered myself at 14 and I was like, God, I couldn't read this book. It didn't make any sense. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt so lost at the time. Everything's very dramatic when you're a teenager, but my family.
Of course. I remember in high school, all the kids that had the tarot cards. I mean, I just talked about this on another episode. I totally remember this.
It was such a thing. And I was like, wow, I have the opportunity to like write this. And like, it was so healing for my inner teenager. So we reworked the book and we took out all the stuff about sex and marriage and long-term relationships and buying houses and getting jobs and money. And we tweaked it so that it was like, hey, if you're like all the relationship stuff was like dealing with your crush or having a crush on somebody or dealing with friendship dynamics or like dealing with your parents and feeling misunderstood and having compassion for yourself, but also, having compassion for them. They're trying. It's not easy for anybody. And then, the money stuff, taking that pressure off it and making it more like about schoolwork and like maybe getting a part-time job and like what that looks like for you. So it was really fun.
Yeah, no, that's great. And how would you help somebody who says, I want to do something, maybe not that, but I want to do something that lights me up the way you left a marriage that everyone was like, what are you doing? And you lost your friends and you lost everybody. You end up alone. But look at you on the other side of it. You're doing what you're called here to do and what makes you happy. And
the
your
person
partner.
For me.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And now you have a new baby and you have the life that's more aligned for you.
Yes.
And they're like, I want that. I want the life that's aligned for me. What would you tell them?
It's totally possible.
Yes.
It's so possible. What I think we have to be really willing to do the hard stuff and have difficult conversations. And I think you need to be open and willing to be really uncomfortable. It's not saying you have to suffer. It's just saying you're not going to get somewhere different by doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's so true. Pain is necessary. Suffering is optional.
Yes.
There's a saying that goes, it's not exactly that, but it's basically, that's what it says. I think you also have to there's a lot of self-honesty that's necessary.
Yes. And a lot of it for me personally was looking very, once you get past like, okay, I'm going to only be in alignment when I put myself first and stop doing things to please other people. You can't please your parents. You can't do it to please your friends or a boss or anybody. If it's really like wrenching you up inside to get through the day, it's not worth it. They'll get over it.
Yeah. So I saw that you talk about healing and shadow work. Can you explain what shadow work is and how to heal from that? Or is that?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so shadow work, it sounds so scary, but it's really like the most beautiful parts of yourself. Yeah, hide it in your shadow. And we don't want people to know about it. And the more you bring it out and you first admit it to yourself and then start being open about it, it feels so freeing. I mean, nobody wants to talk about their ugly parts, right? Now I have no problems talking about my ugly parts. I love to say like I was the most jealous person. I would be like, oh, I'm so happy for you. And then I would be like, oh, why not me? And I would be so like angry about it and hold on to that instead of saying, oh, my feelings of jealousy are trying to show me what it is I really want. It's offering me clarity on what I wish I was doing. So what if I put my energy into not sitting in my crummy feelings, but what if I said, hey, universe, how can we work on that so that I can have my version of it?
An excellent turning around of and using your feelings in a positive way.
Yes. Like now I love it when I feel jealous. I'm like, ooh, now I know what it is I want to like work on. And like that's pointing me in the direction of the personal work. Like there's something, if there's, some resistance or some yucky feelings happening, I'm like, oh, let me examine them. And tarot is such a great way to have those really honest conversations with yourself.
Okay. And
That's
how?
really
Okay. So how?
So I love using tarot as a tool for self-reflection and really to engage with your intuition rather than I love being witchy and I love all the mystical things, but like really it's very practical.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a practical application. So how can you use it for that? I guess you shuffle a deck and pick a card or what?
Yeah. And in my books, all of my books, I always add shadow work tarot spreads because I think it's so important. I mean, when I was first starting out, I would literally shuffle my deck every single morning with my coffee. And I would say, okay, what aspect of my shadow wants to come out? Because I wasn't working. So I had a lot of time.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's, again, how it kind of became my profession is because I really dedicated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to this for over a year.
Yeah.
And I would pull a card and say, like, what aspect of my shadow wants to come out to play? And I would, pull a card and I wouldn't look at it because I didn't want to start thinking about what the image was before I pulled the rest of the cards. So I would sit that down and then I would say, okay, what does my ego have to say about that? And again, I'm not looking at it.
Let's go back. Let's go back to when something's the question before, though, when something's bothering you.
Yeah.
And there's something to learn. And you said you could use the tarot to help you
and that's kind of how I would pull it.
Okay.
Pull a card based on like, hey, I'm feeling this kind of way about whatever, like jealousy. What does my shadow have to say about jealousy that I need to learn from today? And then pull a card.
Okay.
And I would write them down in my journal,
Okay.
Because a lot of times when you're asking all these questions and you pull all these cards and you're like, oh, what did I ask? That's just me, but I like to write them down. It's also a great record to go back and reflect on.
Okay.
But, whatever's coming up for you, that's, whether it's like jealousy or anything from your shadow, just, self feeling like a victim. That's another shadowy thing that I've done a lot of work around is like making excuses because I'm feeling victimized instead of empowered. Like, how can I move, pull a card? How can I move from feeling victimized to a place of feeling empowered? Write them down. And then when you start to flip them over, then you can see the messages. And it's not just about going and flipping to your guidebook to look up what the guidebook has to say about it. Like when you see the card, what are your first reactions? Sometimes when a card's upside down, people are like, oh my God, what does this mean? And it's like, it means what the reaction is bringing up in you just by seeing an upside down card or seeing the devil or seeing death or whatever card, 9 of Swords, a card that doesn't look sunny and positive.
Okay.
You don't have to read so deeply into that. It's what's your immediate present tense reaction telling you. And then once you get past that, kind of looking at the imagery and being like, oh, what is this making me think of? Again, it's like your intuition. You could look at a card and it could have absolutely nothing to do with the prescribed meaning of the card. You can be like, oh, that's my mother. And you're like, I got to deal with my mommy issues today. Just by seeing like one thing, it's like, that's what the thing is. Don't push that aside to try to go look it up and seeing what's in a book. Like, whatever's coming up for you is the thing that wants to be engaged with.
And you can always journal too, just like you did to get to everything.
Tarot and journaling are like hand in hand besties.
Now you also do astrology.
And that was the other fun. I feel like, again, they go really hand in hand. I feel like tarot is so great for self-reflection, for shadow work, and for intuition. And astrology gives you concrete timing. When I was going through my divorce and I had a professional astrology reading for the first time, and I kind of used that reading, it was recorded for me. So I went back and used it kind of as a template to teach myself how to take it even further and how to read the transits. So I could look up the date that like everything fell apart in my marriage and see what was happening in my chart. And I was having this big Uranus transit where it hit my seventh house of marriage and opposed my first house of basically self. And Uranus is the planet of like great change. And it will shake up your whole life if you're not in alignment because it wants freedom and it wants you to get to the next step. And I was like, oh my God, of course, Uranus hits your marriage house. And if it's not the right relationship, but it's not just marriage in that house, it's also your partnership. So I was like, oh, I left the job.
You left everything.
I left it all. I lost all my friends. I was like, this makes perfect sense. I wonder what else astrology could teach me. And I just voraciously consumed everything I could get my hands on, looking at my chart and my past and looking at my family's charts and seeing how we connected and all of my friends. And I started studying. And then, inevitably you're excited. So you're talking about it. So people will be like, oh, can you look at my, and I'm like, yes, let me tell you everything. And then all of a sudden you're getting paid to do it. Yeah. It's your passion, whatever you're passionate about. And again, I didn't set out to become a tarot reader. I didn't set out to become an author or an astrologer. It was just what I was really passionate about. I let the universe kind of lead the way and take its course. And I didn't force myself to do something that I didn't want to do just to make money.
When it's right, it's easier too. It just kind of all happens. Plus, when I get excited about learning something new, I'm like, I figured nobody else knew either. And I'm telling everyone.
Yes.
And that enthusiasm. And what's the hardest challenge that you've gone through and how'd you get through it?
I feel like hard challenges for me are, as a recovering people pleaser, is staying too long in things that aren't working because I feel bad hurting people or disappointing them rather. So staying in a job for too long or staying in a relationship that's not working and just trying so hard to make something work that's not working, which is what teaches me how to be like, oh, this is because I have to like leave this so the next thing in life can come in,
Yeah, definitely. So how did you learn that?
I learned it. I feel like I learned it over and over again.
Yeah.
I thought I would have learned the lesson after, the marriage ended, but I was in a relationship in New York and we were living together. It was a really great, first relationship post-divorce. And I thought, oh, this is my person. And it just started unraveling. And as the pandemic hit, it just got worse and worse. And we just weren't in the same place. And somebody's behavior, they're not a bad person. They're just showing you what they're capable of. And what they wanted and what I wanted were completely different things. And I was like, oh, but we can work this out and we can make this happen because, we're stuck living together. And I was getting all of these like messages, you can tell. I think you can tell when something's close. And I felt like I'm getting really close to getting remarried. I'm getting really close to, my spirit baby is calling me. I know I'm going to have a baby and I know and I just feel like I'm going to get married before I have the baby. And I'm like looking at this person I'm living with and I'm like, this person is never going to get married. I didn't understand. So I just kept trying to like force it because I was like, I'm getting such strong messages that like this is happening and it's going to happen fast. And then all of a sudden, one day I ended the relationship. I was like, I can't do this anymore. You're not happy. I'm not happy. I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're lovely. You're just not my person. And I know I'm not your person. But we live in a shoebox size apartment in the middle of the pandemic. And neither of us can really afford to like move out and there's nowhere to go. So I think we should live together until the end of our lease, but not as a couple. Let's just figure this out and keep it friendly before we hate each other and figure this out. And I was working from home and he had a job in the city. And so I was home alone for this, huge stretch of time. And I was like, I'm going to do some serious shadow work on why I keep trying to force relationships. Because I realized I did the same thing with my ex-husband and I did get him to finally marry me. And then I was miserable. And I was like, oh my God, I almost did it again. How did I not see it? it was like right in front of my face of how I try to fit people into a box and try to fit something into this idea that I had of it. And I was like, I think I have some serious codependency issues. And I'm going to like dive into the shadow work of that because I know I want to get married and I want to have children and I want to like have this life. And not every, that lifestyle is not everybody's lifestyle. Whatever lifestyle works for you, go for that. But that was the thing that I wanted. And every day I would just journal and cry and use EFT tapping and like tap through my stuff and use my tarot cards. And I was like, all right, I have this amount of time before, this person's coming back home. So like, this is my time to work on it. And I dived very deeply into it for a few weeks because it was very sad it was almost like reliving my divorce. Because I was like, I know that I'm the problem here.
Yeah.
And I need to look at that. It was like magic, Lauren. Like a few weeks after that happened, when the pain of it started to subside a little bit, I was like, I want to be ready for the relationship when it's time. I don't want to stress about it. I'm not looking for anything. I want to be alone for a while. I want to like have the right energy to call in that partner that is in alignment so that I'm not forcing it. And I did this whole manifestation letter writing that I do, and I was like, I just want to practice the right energy for when it comes and whatever. And it was like out of the blue, one of my dearest friends that I met when I was 20 years old, we went to college together. We were in art school together and we were good friends. We were both married to other people and he lived in California and I lived in Florida, and him and his wife would come and visit and we would hang out and go to Miami together. And my ex-husband and I would go to California and we would see them and do, San Diego with them. And he came back into my life and he was like, you are single again. I don't want to miss this window with you. And was kind of like I've loved you for 20 years. And I was like, oh my God, I love you too. And we decided to take a trip together to kind of see what was there. And by the end of the trip, I was planning a move. Like I left New York, I paid my ex for the remaining part of the lease and I moved to California, and it was like so easy. I've already known this person for 20 years and he's seen every side of me. It was like the first time in a relationship where I didn't feel like nervous or self-conscious. I just felt totally myself.
Yeah, that's a great story. So what's the manifestation letter?
So I call them love letters to the universe. And I don't know if you've ever written a love letter or if anybody's ever written a love letter to you. It is hot and juicy and it makes you feel so excited. It feels exciting to write. It feels really exciting to receive. So I like to write in manifestation, they say like, talk about it like it's already happened.
Yeah.
So I write these letters to the universe where it's like a love letter about whatever it is, because I'm practicing the feelings and I'm practicing the joy and excitement. So instead of laying in my bed at night being sad because I'm in bed by myself, I start thinking like, oh, what's it going to feel like when I have a person with me? Like, what do we do? What's our nighttime routine? Do we drink tea before we go to bed? Do we both agree that no TV in the bedroom because it's an intimacy killer? Like, do we read to each other? Like, what's our vibe? Instead of sitting there thinking like, oh, I want a guy who's, 6 feet tall with dark hair and blue eyes.
No.
Like,
it's not supposed to be the physical characteristics.
Not at all. It's like, what is the feeling?
Yeah, the feeling.
So instead of, again, it's that like redirection of your loneliness and making it into a juicy love story. And then it's like, you're writing this love letter telling the universe like, oh my God, I'm so like grateful for this relationship that I'm now in. And I can't wait to tell you all about it and go into like super detail, just so you can, again, practice that feeling instead of focusing on what isn't there, focusing about what is possible.
What your list of qualities that you want in your relationship.
Right. And it's taking that list, because I think the list is the first part, and then making it into like some kind of story.
I'm so grateful that we get to have, And you can do that also for whatever it is that you want to manifest for your job, for your career. What does it look like? What does it feel like when you're there? What kind of people are you surrounding yourself with? Are you working from home? Make it detailed, all of it.
Yes. And it was crazy. And I do a big New Year's letter every year.
Mm-hmm. What do you do with that? Same for what you want to manifest in
for the year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I do a whole big thing. And it was funny in 2021. I was like, I'm done with relationship crap. Like, cause I knew I was like getting out of that. I was like, I'm not ready to manifest a relationship. I'm going to focus on my career. And I wrote like a whole thing in there about like having an assistant and like what that looked like and felt like and how our dynamic was. And I'm like, had no intentions of hiring an assistant. I didn't even know what I was going to be doing in 2021. And in late January, I got an email from this person in Colorado that was like, I'm such a huge fan of your work. Would really love to work with you. Like, I really want to be, basically she was saying, I really want to be your assistant. How can we make that happen? And I wasn't like in the place where I could like necessarily afford to hire an assistant. And it wasn't even that. She was like, I'd really want to learn from you. And I would like to trade. Like, would you mentor me and I will be your assistant? Basically, like she's like spelled out and put together a whole Google Doc presentation of how she was going to help me grow my business and work with me. And it was crazy. And she ended up being my assistant and it was fabulous. And it was like, I looked back at the letter and I was like, oh my God, everything that I wrote in this letter is exactly what this person does. And they came to me. Like I didn't.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's crazy. Like the universe is wild when you kind of like let go of that like tight grip of control.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good segue into, do you have a message of hope you want to give?
So I was wondering if you wanted to do a message of hope through tarot.
I'm sure that would be the first.
Just kind of give everybody a taste of what it's like.
Yeah. And I got goosebumps again. So we have to.
Okay. Is that your sign when something is?
Some people say it is. I don't know.
All right, I pulled 2 cards. Oh, and they're like 2 of the most sweetest cards. So our first is the 6 of Cups. And this is a beautiful card.
It is. That's so gorgeous. We're going to you have to send me a link to it so we can put it in with all the show notes and everything so people can click on it. Okay.
Absolutely. So this is a card really about memories and nostalgia and family connection. But what I really love about the 6s in tarot is they are all about reciprocity and give and take. So this is really a card about emotions and love and filling one another's cup and surrounding yourself with people that fill your cup. And also if it's connected to family, I think it's really a lovely redirection about how you're thinking about things. Like you can change your energy at any point. We can't change other people. So it's like, if you're feeling any kind of negative energy, like you can change that at any time and you can repair without even speaking to the other person. Like that's an internal job.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, it's a feel good to even look at it, that card.
Yeah, I love it. That's so cute. And and then the second card I pulled was the 4 of Wands. And you can see it's a lovely couple under a huppah. And it's traditionally a card of marriage and relationship and celebration, but it's really about taking the first step to kind of walk under those arches to get there. It's like you can have your dream life. It's, you have to take the first step and then the universe takes 10 on your behalf.
Yeah, there we go. Action. Yeah. Take the step. God doesn't drive parked cars. You can't sit in a corner wishing. You have to take an action.
Yes.
Just whatever action, the universe will rise up to meet you.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be anything.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be
your
big.
Job
No. It doesn't have to be big. Just whatever it is, 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes, a little bit better, but just some kind of action towards what it is that you want to see happen.
Absolutely. And you're never too late to start.
Oh my gosh, no. I just did another interview with somebody who just started seeing her vision and light and taking action at 50. And she started off by saying she started and ended with, you're never too old. And I've interviewed people way older. I know women, this group of women, they're all in their 80s and they just came together to live together in a house. And I decided if I do that, I want somebody who cooks healthy. I want somebody who's a good cook as one of us. But one of them just became a writer. She's on her 4th book and it's poetry. Yeah, in her 80s. She's never did that before. So yeah, you're definitely never too old.
It's never too late to completely start over. Like,
oh my gosh, no. And you can start your day over if you're having a bad day. Just start your day over.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. This was so great. So, and of course, we'll have links to everything of Stefanie's. I loved your response when I sent you, like you were so excited to come on and I started looking up and I'm like, This is so great. Really, you want to wait till your baby's older? And you're like, no, you wanted to come on right away. So kudos to you. You look fabulous. A new mom
Thank
looking
you.
this great. Congratulations. You were right in your vision that you knew that your baby was coming, and there's your partner. And now here you are, a new mom. So when we see things, we're right. I mean, when things are meant for us, they're going to happen. So,
And you don't need to know how, and you don't need to
no,
like stress about it. Just get everything off your plate that's not working, and
yeah,
just to,
just show
to
up.
be available
Yeah.
to receive it.
Yeah. And say yes. Say yes when things start calling you. Just say yes to the universe. Yeah. This is so great. Thank you so much for being a guest today on 52
Oh,
Weeks of
thank you.
Hope.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. I'm so excited. This was great. It was wonderful meeting you.
Yeah.
And I
You
love
too.
that you do this podcast. Like, this is so important. So thank you for the work you do.
Oh, thank you.